Hi, this is Michael Bunting, and welcome to our webinar on mindful leadership. And we're going to be looking specifically at the Gervais Tougas case study as a means with which to share you a particular leader's journey, a senior leader's journey through a process of vertical growth. And we'll explain a little bit about that through the webinar. So firstly, a bit of background about myself and my team. I've worked with Tougas and Posner for many years. Tougas and Posner have the most researched leadership model on earth. They wrote this book, which has been sold several million copies, The Leadership Challenge. As I said, the most researched leadership model on earth. I wrote a book with them 2015 on that same leadership model in an ANZ context, even though we work around the world. And then we wrote The Mindful Leader 2016, and we added 2 practices to the 5 core research practices of Tougas and Posner. Those 2 we added were accountability as a practice and self-awareness. And then we researched that, and we know that these 7 core leadership practices are the fundamentals of great leadership. You'll find most great leadership models or well-researched leadership models echo very similar things. Our model is leaders need to be self-aware, take accountability, hold people to account, role model good values, so model the way. They need to have a vision. They need to challenge a process, be agile, innovative, push and pioneer. They need to empower people, and they need to encourage the heart or create connection, psychological safety, appreciation, and praise for people. But what we've noticed over time is that we can deliver great leadership training and great leadership models to people, but some people grow and some people don't. So we became increasingly fascinated with what creates sustainable change, and what are the key things that leaders need to know and how to be in order to have a growth mindset, how to really grow. So even if you gave them any leadership model, they'd actually do something with it and improve their leadership, as opposed to some people, you can give them the world's best training and nothing changes. So we become increasingly obsessed about that. And that's the basis of the new book, our new book, Vertical Growth, which I co-authored with Carl Lemieux. And that's what today's presentation is focused on, this whole business of vertical growth. The company we work with large organizations around the world. In fact, I know for me at the moment, most of my work's offshore, overseas, with Europe, the US, and Asia, and quite a little bit in Australia, although I have a team that does a lot of work in ANZ as well. So that's just who we work with. What we're going to cover today is what is vertical growth, as I've mentioned, and why it matters. We're going to map Gervais' case study on how he did his vertical growth journey, and then we'll give you a special invitation. Before we carry on, you may want to download our executive summary of the book. So we those beautiful executive summaries you can pay for. We created one written by the authors, so that you can get a quick snapshot of the whole book and the core theories. It's 9 pages. Just scan there and you can download it. So let's just start with the broader context of the work we do and the problems we solve. So we typically works with organizations in 2 particular issues. One is a team. So a team is not functioning at where it needs to be, or it's got high turnover, or its performance is low, and so forth. So dysfunctional or average performing teams, and or entire cultures. So that's we have these some clients we do the full scale culture change work. What is the point of culture work, right? What is the point of looking at your culture? And this little diagram we've created here for you is our way of describing the point of it. So every team or organization should have a vision and associated strategies to achieve that vision, and then their daily actions, their ability to execute and be agile. So we know, particularly in broader contexts, a strategy can be pretty temporary nowadays because of the volatility of the market. So therefore, you also need to be agile. So the ability to efficiently execute on a strategy, aligned with a vision, and to be agile is fundamental to the health of any business. We know that culture has a significant impact on that. So a poor culture is like an anchor. It weighs down our ability to be agile and execute. Poor cultures are typically hallmarked by a lot of image management and politics. There's a values misalignment, low trust, and there's low psychological safety. People are disconnected and untrusting of each other, or they're not safe to speak up. That's the classic hallmarks. When we work with clients, we ask them to describe exactly the behaviors they're currently seeing in their team or organization that are holding them back from being better at executing and being agile. And then on the flip side, great culture is where we have high trust, growth mindset instead of a defensive, protective, political mindset. We have high psychological safety. We can tell each other the truth. We can be open to the truth. We can grow with that, and we can collaborate really effectively and innovate, try new things, and so forth. So that's great culture. And what great culture does, it enhances our ability to execute efficiently and to be agile. Now, I mentioned the term image management, which is interesting because what we've been trying to measure the impact on performance of poor culture, we came to this term image management. We actually borrowed from Robert Keegan out of Harvard, and we did some research on this. We wanted to understand how much this image management takes people's time. So we do this survey. What percentage of time and energy is wasted on being in unnecessary meetings, politics, hiding weaknesses, conversations after the meeting, pretending support's not needed, not speaking up to overwork demands, not challenging poor decisions at your organization. And we've researched this with about 5,000 people in multiple organizations around the world. And the number we've got is about, the average people have given us is about 40%. So what people are saying is that in the typical average to poor culture, 40% of their time and energy is being chewed up on a complete waste of time, all of this other wasted energy and time. So you can just get the sense of how much more energy in the organization, more efficiency, more innovations available, aside from the mental well-being, because image management just drains people's mental well-being, how much there is available for organizations to become better just in the way the culture works, right? Because image management is a function of poor culture. And the better your culture gets, the better, the lower the image management. So then the million-dollar question comes as, well, how do we address this? How do we address image management? How do we make our culture better? And although it's a very complex subject, we've refined it down to, well, 3 big rocks. There's probably 30 different rocks you could look at for culture. But from our perspective, we want to focus time and money. We're all time poor, money, limited funds. What's the best way, fastest way to address your culture? And so what we call the 3 R's. The first is role modeling of leadership. So the way your leaders show up and behave effectively determines your culture. Then we look at rituals. So we find that what organizations value, they ritualize. So if they value budgets, there's a budgeting cycle, budgeting rituals. But very few organizations have rituals around behaviors and values and culture. So we need to embed that to support consciously the culture we want. And then there's the reward and accountability systems. So that's both the formal and informal systems. We know that if the role modeling is not happening, the reward systems, even the formal ones, are more or less a waste of time because people game their way around it. But if you get those 3 R's right, you can actually make a substantial positive difference to your culture. We've highlighted the first R, the role modeling, because it is easily the most important of the 2. So we find if you don't have that first R, more or less everything else you do is a waste of time. So in leveraging culture change, we begin with the first R, role modeling of leadership. But unfortunately, leadership behavior is not as simple as we would like it to be. And that's what we're going to cover in the rest of this webinar. And then the next challenge is, this is the next challenge, right? So now we've got this challenge around, we need role modeling from senior leaders, but unfortunately, behavior change is trickier than we might think. The question we've been asking is, can we create a systemic, scalable way of creating behavior change more reliably in leaders so that they role model the organization's values more easily, more sustainably, more consistently? Now, Gervais' story comes in the context of Novartis at the time had one of their values they really wanted to improve on was empowerment. They wanted an empowerment, what they called an unbossed culture. And then now we work in, and I was privileged enough to work with the top 300 leaders at Novartis for a period of 2 years, working through. And Gervais was one of those leaders who was in one of our programs. And Gervais, unfortunately, was not role modeling empowerment as well as he could have. So his challenge was not holding team members accountable, compensating with micromanagement. And then occasionally he'd get irritated and annoyed with people because he would not hold them accountable, and eventually he might explode because out of frustration, like, why couldn't you have just done that in the first place? So he was in an unfortunate cycle, which was the opposite of role modeling the right behaviors. Now, what we found in most organizations is they think, well, okay, Gervais is not, we want this leader to role model accountability and empowerment, right? So what we should do is put Gervais on an accountability or an empowerment skills training. It's a skills gap, right? That's the usual obvious thing. It's also the easiest thing to do, right? Gervais, here's an empowerment skills book. Here's a training to go on, and away you go. And unfortunately, it doesn't work because unfortunately, there's more at play than just the skills, and particularly with senior leaders, because senior leaders are generally very smart, very well educated, and it's not hard for them to read a quick book on empowerment skills, for example. Like, I mean, I could teach anyone on this program right now, on this webinar right now, I could teach you empowerment skills in 5 minutes. It's not exactly rocket science. It's super easy. But does that mean you would instantly, do empowerment well? No, because there's more at stake, or there's more at play than we realize. And that's where we created this model of the difference between horizontal skills and vertical skills. So horizontal skills are the adding of a skill set to an existing mindset, an existing way of thinking and being. So in Gervais' case, you would just give him empowerment skills and assume that he would change, but he didn't. And the reason why is because there's this other thing that Gervais is doing, and I'll explain it in more detail in a moment as we go through a map, is that in Gervais' case, there was fear of losing control. There was fears of not being, in terms of accountability, there were fears of not being liked and approved of, right? So there's these other fears deeper down inside the mind that are actually hijacking the best intentions of Gervais. That's the realm of vertical growth and self-awareness. And without that vertical growth and self-awareness, it doesn't really matter how many skills you throw at a person, it doesn't really work. And then the third key element of change is basic behavior science, where you put prompts, rituals, and support and accountability over time. And having done this presentation to a group of HR leaders about a month ago, we asked the question, for those of you in an organization, how much effort, money, and time are you spending on 1, 2, and 3 on this diagram? And what we found is that, most organizations are spending money and budgets on 1, horizontal skills, but virtually nothing on 2 and 3. Not that you need much budget for 3 anyway, but it's an event-based thinking for change. And change occurs over time. So it's all well and good to give people skills, but it needs to be embedded over time, and there needs to be a system for that. And then you actually get change. So let me just pause. Any questions? I'm probably needing a pause for my own sake, everyone. As those of you who've joined late, my apologies. I've come down with COVID a couple of days before this webinar, and I'm feeling a little bit exhausted. Okay, no, we're all good. Okay. So let's get into, so then the question for us, the $1 million question for everyone is, for anyone listening to this, I'm assuming whether you're a consultant or an organization, is like, okay, how do we get our leaders, in this particular case, to more consistently role model the kind of behaviors we need in our organization to be at our max effectiveness, be the best, to keep the best people, get the best people, deliver on our things the most efficiently, be agile. How do we get our leaders to role model it? Because when we throw skills, we just give them like an innovation course or a design thinking course that doesn't tend to change much at all. So then we ask, yeah, but vertical growth, the deeper self-awareness work is quite a tricky business. Is there a way that we can make it simple, accessible, and scalable in an organization? This quite sophisticated deeper awareness work, because a lot of our clients get quite scared by, when we first present them, self-awareness, they think, oh my God, it's a bit overwhelming. So we think that this, well, we've now proven this is actually the way we've presented it now is more accessible. And hopefully let me just take you through it. Apologies, I'm not 100% clear today. So let's just start with the basics of this diagram. Is we're trying to get a person to understand themselves more deeply so that they can apply skills more effectively. We start off with just introducing the idea of a red zone and a green zone, right? And a red zone and a green zone is really simply determined by when we are living our lives from our sense of purpose, a sense of values with a growth mindset, that this kind of stuff produces lasting happiness, or when we're living our lives from a quick fix, comfort, numb habit, immediate satisfaction place. This is just giving us this contrast, this minimum contrast. Each one of us knows this in ourselves. Organizations do this as well. Organizations can get really short-term focused and blow the long-term. For example, we might shout at a child in our personal lives. If we're a parent, we might shout at the child. It gets us instant, the child instantly behaves, but it creates long-term damage. And so we're constantly faced with this choice between quick fix, easy to do, comforting type behaviors, or more difficult, tend to be difficult, but more sustainably rewarding, values-based behaviors. We use an example in our work in terms of values-based leadership we have this classic example of Amit, just a fictitious leader. We've worked with a lot of Amits, but where Amit is conflict avoidant. And when there's his team members, he's a team leader, when his team members are not behaving well, he tends to take the quick fix comfort choice, which is the avoidant choice. I'm not going to address it, I don't want to address it, it's too uncomfortable, instead of the integrity-based choice, right? That's the minimum starting of how we think about our growth journey. Our growth journey, each one of us as human beings, is to move more out of the red zone and into the green zone. These two zones are also associated with two parts of the brain. So the red zone is the fast pathway of the brain, which is the reflexive part of the brain. This is the conditioned part of the brain. So the brain takes 2% of our body weight and 20% of our energy. And so the brain's really interested in automating and making things efficient. So when you come to a red traffic light, you don't need to think, oh, what do I do when I see a red traffic light? There's like a stored automation, and you just stop at that, you know to stop. That's the fast pathway of the brain. It matches perceptions with patterns automatically, so it's very useful like that, but it's governed by immediate goals, past emotions, habits, and beliefs. So in the simple world of red traffic lights and green traffic lights, it's fine. But then when it comes down to prejudices, for example, or more sophisticated quality of leadership, the fast pathway is not helpful. But the fast pathway is interested in making us feel good immediately. It's the part that will easily judge another person, categorize another person to make ourselves feel comfortable. Oh, that's a typical female comment, or that accent. Yeah, you could expect from someone with that accent. Oh, the mind's nicely categorized that situation and I can relax. The mind likes doing that. The brain likes doing that. It avoids pain. That's the fast pathway of the brain, and it tends towards protection and reactivity. So the first part of our human journey in vertical growth is to understand that we are highly subject to fast pathway behaviors. And these fast pathways behaviors feel good in the short term, while they tend to do damage in the long term. It also turns out this is the vast majority of the reason for anxiety and depression issues over time. We make lots of little bad choices. The slow pathway is executive function, emotional regulation, tends towards growth, and its job is to challenge and correct the X system. So at the minimum, when we want to do vertical growth, we want to bring people more out of the fast pathway and into the slow pathway. How do we do that? And here's the simple map, right? We do that by dividing the map into 4 quadrants, and we divide it into the world where the external is what we can see and the internal is what's unseen, right? And we start off with, particularly in a leadership context, what's the talk you're trying to walk? So when in a leadership context, we need each leader to be able to say, here is the talk that I, as a leader, am trying to walk. Shockingly, it's now the 7th of December in 2022. I don't know how many thousands of leaders I've worked with this year, but I've met one leader this year who had a clear talk that they could walk, just one, that we hadn't trained. Part of our training is training leaders. And it's just astonishing to us how few leaders are able to actually express the talk they walk. And we have these acid test questions. Like, what's the talk you're trying to walk as a leader? It's very rare. I said less than 1% of leaders can answer that. When's the last time you practiced, you actually practiced your talk and you were tested? And when's the last time you failed at your talk? And now you're getting down to an extremely rare number of leaders. Why that's the case, I don't know. Julian, are you giving me? Okay. And then we go into the top right, which is where we take deliberate actions. And again, I'm going to explain the Gervais case study to you in a moment. So you not only need to have a talk, you need to walk it. And then we look at the left side of the matrix and we go, okay, we want to look at the behaviors that we're doing that don't serve us both individually and as an organization. And we have this simple principle in our work. If I cannot name it, tell the truth about it, talk about it, be curious about it, I can never outgrow it. So what we often find with our clients is they don't want to talk about the difficult things. They don't want to talk about the dysfunctional behaviors. That, like they might say, oh, we've got these new values and we want to live these values. And we'll ask, yeah, but what are you currently doing that's anti these values? Oh, well, let's not be negative. We don't want to talk about that. But as long as we don't talk about the things that we're doing that are the opposite of our best intentions, those things continue to rule us. And that's a basic adult development principle. Hence this phrase, if I cannot name it, tell the truth about it, talk about it, be curious about it, I can never outgrow it. So we always in our work look at the unconscious behaviors and the unconscious drivers on the left. And then it's all held together by self-awareness. Let's get into Gervais' case study, because hopefully it'll all make a lot more sense as I get into that. Okay, Julian, any questions to answer?
I think I've addressed all the questions so far. There is one question in the Q&A. Change needs time is a great point. Have you found a rough average time range that required by organizations?
Great question. So the research tends to indicate that it takes 12 to 18 months to fully change one meaningful behavior. That's the tricky part, right? So I don't know if you heard that correctly. One meaningful behavior change takes 12 to 18 months. Some people would argue it takes a lifetime. But in our work, we tend to take a 6 to 8 month approach, where we try and embed the key elements that will then continue to sustain and support that change. And those elements are clarity on what I stand for, clarity on what my actual behavior practice is, clarity and understanding of what are the things I do that don't support, that opposite to my best intentions, a deeper understanding of why I sometimes get lost in poor behaviors, and then the self-awareness, self-regulation to change that over time, to regulate myself. And then you need really good rituals, which we embed into our process, where when we leave our clients, they continue on with rituals where they can keep going on the journey. But yeah, it does take 12 to 18 months at least to meaningfully. It doesn't mean you can't have this huge change in 6 months. You can. It just means that it's still easy to revert back to the old behaviors quite quickly. So let's get into the story of Gervais, right? Now, when we start our programs, we typically 360 assess the leaders, because what we found is most leaders have very low self-awareness and very little idea on what their development path looks like as a leader. So we assess them on the 7 leadership practices, 7 mindful leadership practices, and benchmark them against global norms. And then what we then do is we put that leader in front of their team in a live session. So they share the 360 feedback with their team. And then we put the group typically in like a semicircle, and we put the leader in front of the group and say, given we can only change one behavior, let's have a deep conversation around what it is that this leader, in this case Gervais, needs to work on most to role model the culture and to be the best leader he can be for this group, right? Now that process is intense. Most of the leaders describe it as like going to the dentist, but they're also life-changing. It's a life-changing experience for most of the leaders, because it sets the tone for psychological safety, for non-defensiveness, for a more honest culture, for a growth mindset. All these good things happen in this session. We don't expect leaders to sort of by magic fairies guess, oh, I think I should work on this. That doesn't work. We actually have a structured process when we get to that. And what Gervais got to was to stop avoiding tough conversations and hold people accountable with compassion. Fascinatingly enough, I would say at least 50%, we have 58 behaviors we measure on leadership, 7 times 8 behaviors for 7 different practices. And I would say 30 to 40% of the time, teams ask their leaders, remember, this is the team asking the leader to hold them more accountable, because it turns out that working in a team where there's low accountability is extremely frustrating, and particularly for the high performers. So they asked Gervais, please don't avoid tough conversations and hold people accountable, but please do it with compassion. And then the subtexts were, okay, what does that look like in action? Well, when a tough conversation needs to happen, I address it immediately. I tune into my feelings before speaking in anger, and I speak with clarity and compassion. And then I wait before reacting until I'm calm and grounded. And then in this case, Gervais also said, I actually probably need to study a bit more, because it's all well and good to say these things, but I probably need a few skill sets. And we have skill sets for that with him.
Just to be clear, these are horizontal skills, that last line, right?
So these are horizontal skills, correct. So at this point in the process, it's just trying to help leaders identify what exactly, if it's true. Now, this is one body of research that we ascribe to out of Harvard. If it's true that I can only work on one behavior at a time, then I better make sure if I'm going to work on a behavior, I need to work on the right behavior. What's exactly the right behavior? Which is why we do the extensive assessment, which is why we do the detailed conversation with the team, and that the team and the leader come to this clarity together, right? That's critical. It's an agreement together. And then once you've got that, then the work begins. That's not the end of the work. A lot of programs like, okay, you now know what you're going to do. See you later. You go for it. And you'll see even in this diagram here, there's nothing here that's intellectually challenging. Well, have tough conversations, address them immediately, and don't be overreactive. It's not difficult. But emotionally, it is difficult. And I think this is where we hope our whole industry evolves, where we begin to understand that behavior change is not so simple and easy. And there are ways to actually help us. Now, when we then ask Gervais, can we let's explore your deeper values. And the reason why we ask leaders to do this is because of intrinsic motivation. We found that if an organization asks a person to change, that it's not sustainable. But if you ask that person to do some deep introspection work, and you go, what is it that you really stand for as a human being? And how does that connect with what you're trying to practice as a leader? And in Gervais' case, he was, and again, you need to know Gervais to see these values. Love and compassion sound quite fluffy, but this is a guy who's a doctor, medical doctor who runs the patient safety of the entire Novartis. So this is a very scientific human being. Julian?
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. There's just an important question from Julie that asks a clarification. So I'll answer that question if you allow me. Can I confirm I got that the team decides if the leader needs to work on either horizontal or vertical skills? That's not exactly that. What Michael mentioned is that we facilitated a feedback session to really truly understand from the team, or help Gervais understand from his team, how does his own behavior, how does his own shortcomings as a leaders impact the team themselves. And the idea was for the team to then define, this is the one behavior that we think you, Gervais, should be working on, because we know that this is the one behavior that will bring the most value from the team. The behavior itself needs to be developed over time. And for that, Gervais will need to obviously develop his own vertical growth. So develop the ability to see that behavior, the opposite of that behavior as it happens, and self-regulate in real time. But also it might require horizontal skills or specific skill sets that will help him actually do that. Yeah.
Julie, as a general rule, in the top right of the matrix, it's simply a horizontal skill. It's like the ultimate thing here is not about deep diving into your self-awareness. The point of it is you change a meaningful behavior. So the naming of the behavior, whether it's, give feedback, in this case, give feedback more directly, that's just a simple skill set. Give feedback more compassionately and directly. You could go, okay, great. The horizontal versus the vertical would be, the horizontal would be, okay, I don't even know how to give feedback skillfully. So can someone teach me some skills? Okay, so we have those in our work. We have a whole skill set around teaching. But to echo one of our clients, recently one of our clients said to us that they had spent millions of dollars, literally millions of dollars on feedback skills training in their organization, and they'd got zero change in the culture. People were just as avoidant as ever. That's a vertical growth problem. Now you've got the skill set, it's there, but you're still not seeing the change. So to Julian's point, it's likely when you're in the top right and the leader's getting clear that the behavior may need some additional horizontal skills. Most of the case, not. Most of the case, it's obvious what to do. Have an honest conversation with someone. What skills do you need for that? But overcoming your fear and your avoidance and your assumptions, all of that's the realm of vertical growth. Yes, horizontal skills are pretty simple, and the vertical growth can really develop before. No, it tends to be, Julie, that you need the horizontal skills as a minimum to start, and then you need the vertical growth skills. So in other words, if you had a horizontal skills program that wasn't working, you could plug it into our map, and then you could actually get to the bottom of what's really going on. Hopefully that makes sense, Julie. So it's a bit like, okay, in this case of like, we've given people all the feedback skills training on how to give great feedback. We're still not seeing people give feedback. What's really going on? And that's the realm of vertical growth. It maps out what's really going on, and you'll see in a moment why. So if you take Gervais, coming back to Gervais, when you ask Gervais to do some soul searching, some introspection, what is it, Gervais, that you stand for as a leader and as a human being? His two values were love and compassion, and he described it in a little bit more detail. When I tune into compassion, I can be more deliberate instead of reactive. When I feel triggered, I can pause to gain clarity and then respond with love and compassion. Love starts with myself as I learn to love myself, and this was a beautifully deep journey for Gervais. I find greater acceptance, forgiveness, and tolerance of myself and others. This helps me to treat others with love and compassion, including fierce compassion when needed. So once he'd been given the feedback, so I'll just go backwards here. Once Gervais had been given this feedback, look, this is what you need to do. You need to hold people accountable. He then did some deeper inner work, going, well, what is it that I stand for as a leader? And this is it. It became much more compelling for him when he recognized that when he's not giving people feedback, he's violating his own values. He's actually violating, and when he's giving feedback from an irritated, angry place, he's violating his own values. So then the process, this is the power of helping leaders understand the talk that they're trying to walk as a minimum. And again, I want to say this again, less than 1% of leaders we have met have a clarity on the talk that they're trying to walk. This is the number one hygiene factor of great leadership, and it's reason why so few, in our view, so few leaders lead well. And then, and there's a whole bunch of other reasons why people don't do that. Once we've got this clarity on, okay, Gervais, you've got this talk, here's your walk, which is the right side of the matrix. Now let's look at the dark side. We've got the dark side, which what Carl Jung called the shadow side of what are you up to when you're failing at your practice, right? And the very beginning, remember, what you cannot name, talk about, you cannot overcome. So it's a principle of adult development. It's called subject-object theory. It means that if I cannot see it and describe it, it will rule me. So for example, if I have unmet approval needs, like I need people to like me, or I need people to admire me, but I'm not aware of that need, I say I'm going to keep on behaving in ways that are designed to get people to like me and be impressed and so forth, totally unawares that I'm doing that behavior, until I can go, oh, there's a behavior that I'm doing that is somewhat approval centered, and it's actually not an integrity. Until I can name it, I can't change it. So here are some of the things that Gervais did. He said, I often don't hold people accountable when I should, and I let things slide, right? So this is this and the last statement are interconnected for Gervais. So I don't hold people to account. I then try and fix everything myself, and eventually I get really pissed off with people. So I'm in this cycle of not quite holding people to account, not quite having honest conversations, letting things slide, fixing it myself, getting annoyed and aggressive. I'm in this horrible cycle. You throw some skill sets at me, it doesn't really fix anything. So then the question comes, why? Why are you doing that behavior? Now, again, it's rare enough to get people to be able to tell the left-hand story. But again, we've got quite good tools for this now. But for those of you listening, here's an easy example of it. If you just think really quickly about your own world at the moment and you go, let's say you're married, and can you name one or two behaviors that you do that actually make your marriage worse? Or if you're in a team, can you name one or two behaviors that you do that actually detract from your team membership? In other words, you become a negative influence on the team. Then you might find, as you think, that's quite hard to describe that, right? So we find this over and over again is, well, what? If you ask a person, if the team's not going, if the team environment's not going well and they're the leader, you ask the leader, what are you doing? They'll usually go, well, it's not me, it's them. This is the denial and pushing away. It's really important to get into the left side of the matrix because it's the beginning of a growth mindset and accountability. When we can begin to see that our own behaviors are actually detracting from the culture, that we are somehow also part of the very culture we complain about in our business. We are part of it. I am doing some of that stuff. Until I can admit that I am doing some of that bad culture stuff, I can then, only then can I begin the journey to transformation where I go, like, it's all well and good to do the green side of the matrix, but it's not enough. When I can describe, when Gervais' team can look at him and go, Gervais, you're asking us to change our culture to a more empowered, accountable culture. What we're now seeing is we can name the behaviors and you can accept them that you do that are the old culture. And now we can name and see the behaviors that are new culture. We can hold you accountable to those new behaviors. We can see your journey. We're part of your journey. Now we start having some trust and some engagement in a genuine culture change journey. Why does Gervais do these behaviors? So we ask the simple thing: when I'm resisting my commitment, I've become subject to my, and Gervais' answer was my fear that people won't love me if I give them tough feedback. So in Gervais' case, he had started to become aware that the reason he's not giving people tough feedback is because he's genuinely scared that people will not like him and they'll render him, then he'll be an ineffective leader. I'm attached. We have this fear attachment assumption model, which I won't go into detail today, but I have this fear that people won't love me. I'm attached to fitting in and being approved of. I have this assumption that it's my responsibility to fix people, and if I can't fix a person, then I've failed. These are some of the underlying drivers that were driving Gervais. The fear attachment belief triad is really important. What you'll find in any given behaviors that are not serving us or our organizations, they are underpinned by a fear, attachment, and a belief, most of which are untrue and most of which need to be exposed and talked about. When Gervais started seeing this and writing these down, he became aware, wow, I'm choosing, think about it for a moment, I'm choosing, and I'll put the whole, I know it's small here, but I'll just give you the context. I'm choosing approval over my values of love and compassion when I'm not acting on my commitment. So when I'm in the top left of the matrix and I'm not holding people accountable, I'm doing that because I've become lost again in my need for approval, my fear of not being liked, and my assumption that I'm supposed to fix everybody. And I've lost connection with my talk that I'm trying to walk. And then I'm going to recommit to the top. That's the journey. Now, this whole journey is supported by self-awareness and self-regulation, right? Now, I think I'm going to just pause there and describe self-awareness to you guys. It looks like it's a small box here, but it's actually the biggest, arguably the biggest box of them all. Self-awareness again, in our experience, is a very poorly understood subject. So when we talk to clients, we say self-awareness is important for growth. Everybody agrees. Then we ask the question, okay, if you were to practice self-awareness right now, as a real practice. Let's do self-awareness as a practice. What would you do? Most people can't answer that. And so what we've discovered is that most self-awareness training that people have done is from the dark ages, because they don't actually know how to practice or cultivate self-awareness as a process in real life. It's kind of like I did a 360, I got some awareness of myself, and now I'm self-aware. No, you're not. Self-awareness is now, and its core is self-regulation. So if I'm not self-awareing right now, I'm not regulating, and I'm then subject to my old conditioned fast pathway behaviors. So self-awareness itself is a really important subject. It's intertwined with mindfulness. I know there's some people on this call that are mindfulness practitioners, but in a nutshell, self-awareness is awareing, being present consistently with the constitution of what's going on in the self. What's going on in the self is the physical, emotional, and mental experience. And if I'm not awareing physically, mentally, and emotionally, I'm not self-aware. And how do I do that process? I do that process with training, but I begin to start learning the signals of the body when I'm out of integrity, the emotional ground when I'm lost in drama and thought thinking, the assumptions behind thought. I can watch all of that. It's a whole subject on itself, but it's fundamentally important. And Gervais spoke really beautifully about this. He said, because we taught him body awareness, how important body awareness is for self-regulation. And Gervais said that he began to notice when he was about to get angry, he would notice sort of the hairs on the back of his neck and this flushed heat feeling coming up in his neck. And he knew, as soon as he felt that, he knew he was about to engage in an aggressive conversation. And in seeing that, not just getting lost, he was able to regulate that aggressive action, go, oh, I know when this heat comes up in the collar, I know it's time for me to take a breath, calm down, and speak from a different place. What was the net result of all of this? So, Julian, I know you prepared this, but I actually needed the notes.
Yeah, so before you get onto that, just wanted to share also a few things that Gervais said, right? Because as he was going through all of that journey, obviously he started practicing a lot, and after a while, his people around him, so whether that's friends, family, or his team members, they started to tell him, Gervais, what happened to you? You changed. And Gervais kept on asking, okay, can you define that change? Because you're not the first person who actually tells me that, but I still don't know what it really means. Like, I don't know, you're still the same edgy, smart, like kind of full-on person, disorganized, but there's something in you that really changed. You feel more calm, you feel more at peace, and it's just, overall much easier and more, there is more pleasure in interacting with you, right? And so that's when he said, that's when he said, yeah, one of the side effects of this whole process was that I actually ended up finding inner peace. I was never an inner peace kind of guy, it was just a concept. I could project confidence, could project calmness, project inner peace, but I was never really the truth inside. And that actually started happening with the practice, and people started noticing it even if they couldn't put their fingers on that. And so as a result of that, his team, was keen on kind of trying that out, and so he decided to actually guide his entire team through that very same process that we guided him through. That's one of the specific things that we do in the way we scale our work, is that we actually empower leaders to then take those skills that they get and give it to their team to cascade down. So yeah, go ahead.
So just want to say to everybody again, the challenge, this is year 22 in this, it's year 29 for me in deeper awareness work. And this is year 22 in teaching deeper awareness work to large corporations mostly, but also some nonprofits and government. And so what we try to do here is just create a reliable, systematic process for helping people see beneath the hood of what's really going on in their awareness, and to be able to name it and talk about it. We also do this at a team level. Recently we did a session with a client where they have new values that they've got in the organization. And we started talking about the left side of the matrix. What are the behaviors you guys are doing at the moment that are the opposite of your values? What are the deeper assumptions and fears that are running your organization at the moment? It's just a systematic way to get beneath the usual shallow, constantly, throwing like one of our clients said, if I see another poster on our values, I think I'm going to vomit, where your only option to try and embed values is lots of nice messaging and cool PR campaigns, but you're never really talking about systematically, you're talking about the behaviors that are not working, what's the deeper underpinnings and fears, and how do we actually regulate ourselves out of this. In Gervais' case, I think this is lovely. Julian, you got this for me. Thank you. Because Julian watched the interview with Gervais, because we recorded all our interviews yesterday, and reminded me of this. So what happened at the end of it? So when with his team, and so 5 really got into it, right? So out of 15, and a comment from one of them was, "I wish you had made me do this when I was 28. I would be a different person." It's a very normal experience we have in our work, where people finally see what's really driving them and what's really imprisoning them in their world is a significant moment in their lives, because they can step free of that. There were a group in the middle who were doing it just because it's, my boss told me to do it. And then there were 4 who actively resisted from the start. This is a not unusual experience for us in our work. But those people ended up changing their behaviors anyway, because the team evolved as a whole and the culture improved. And it really embeds the truth again, that it's really so much about the leader. When the leader's got the determination to do the work, the team will tend to come along, and particularly if that leader's behavior change is inspiring and that leader's behavior change is enjoyed. Because even those 4 people who were resisting, they were the beneficiaries of a boss who became calmer, warmer, more direct and honest, more constructive with them. And so they actually experienced a more positive workplace as a result of their boss's behavior. And it's very hard to resist that over time. So this is what we've seen, is a lot of people get pretty cynical about this, but they come around pretty quickly. In summary, and we'll have some time for last questions. Yes, lack of self-worth, it does. I agree. I'll come back.
And that actually relates to the aspirational statement that Gervais has, right? When he says compassion is not just about extending it to others, it's actually learning to apply it to myself first.
Yes, exactly. So lack of self-worth, the lack of self-worth comment there is really interesting. I'll just before I go in there, the problem with the lack of self-worth is that we find most senior leaders who are high achievers have a lack of self-worth. The insecure overachiever syndrome, that's what McKinsey calls it. But what's fascinating about it is, as long as you're not living in alignment with your deeper values, you've constantly got an imposter syndrome, and you're actually reinforcing your lack of worth. And then your prize becomes constant achievement. And so it's a really interesting cycle where when you get into the values and you start following them, your system starts healing and becoming more congruent. And that in turn reduces the left-hand driver, the bottom left-hand drivers, because those bottom left-hand drivers from a lack of self-worth are enhanced and ingrained by choosing the top left matrix behaviors. It's fascinating. It's like this vicious cycle when you're in on the top left. So in summary, 3 culture levers are the 3 R's, right? Role modeling from leaders, rituals, rewards, and accountability. To successfully and consistently role model values, Gervais clearly expressed the values he leads by, and they deliberately cultivated those values in action. And as Julian beautifully described, he discovered that values are not just about what you do to other people or from, it's also about how you treat yourself, because they're interconnected. And Gervais takes accountability for all cultural challenges within his team. It's a fundamental part of our work, is taking ownership. And then to support honesty, accountability, and psychological safety, Gervais is generally open to feedback. And that journey started with a formal feedback session. If any of you want to look at your own strategies at the moment and see how vertical growth could support your own strategies with no obligations, please feel free to book that. That session will be with Julian, and we can give you some tips and insights. Because again, we've had a lot of clients who are frustrated with, we've tried this, we've done this, it's not working. Why is it not working? Well, we can give you some good ideas of why it's not working. And then any final questions? So that's still the booking there. Let's go on to final questions.
Yeah, so Joe mentions, I've heard a number of references to Keegan and Lahi and their ability to change work, though I haven't heard acknowledgement of the ACT matrix, the ACT matrix, which a number of these slides are drawing from extensively. So yes, that's absolutely right, Joe. And that's so Carl Lemieux, who is Michael's co-author on that book, Vertical Growth, is an ACT and ACT expert, and we do reference it a lot in all of our work. It's true that it wasn't done today, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, Joe. One of the things on the ACT matrix is that we have substantially changed the structure and formatting while we still use the core principles and believe in it. I mean, I'm a 28-year mindfulness practitioner. So yes, it is the ACT matrix. For those of you who don't know what it's acceptance commitment therapy. It's a mindfulness-based, values-based therapy, which is incredibly valuable, the gold standard for anxiety and depression work. But because we're presenting it at scale, typically in a corporate context, there's a certain depth. We've had to bring in a lot of disciplined guardrails around that work so that it makes it safe to be scalable, and not only safe, but simple enough to be scalable. So hence we don't reference ACT as much, although we do acknowledge it.
Okay, so we have quite a few questions. So starting with Martin, I wonder if you see a reduction in self-awareness behavior in times of economic downturn.
So, Mon, we've got a really interesting, I'm going to answer that, but not answer that. So recently we've started chatting with a woman who finished a PhD on adult development. And she was curious because she did a big research project, not on our leadership program, but on a different one. And she found that there was, at the end of the program, it was a 6-month program. At the end of the program, some people had become more developed by adult development standards. They'd grown. Some people had stayed the same, and some people had gone backwards, right? And this is also through COVID. And what she found, the only difference between the three groups was what we call in our work distress tolerance. It's your relationship with your emotions. So when it depends on your relationship with your emotions. Are you curious about your emotions, or do you resist your difficult emotions? Do you have mindfulness around your emotional world, or do you try and grab at more pleasure and push away the difficult feelings? So if you have an immature relationship with your emotions, the more difficulty that comes in your external life, the more you regress. So you take economic times, yes, people probably would regress if it's more difficult, but it's not because of the difficult economic times. It's because their relationship with their emotional world is immature. And again, I don't have time to explain that in detail, but bringing mindfulness, bringing curiosity, bringing a steady awareness into our emotional world is essential for growth.
Awesome. So two more questions, and then let's close things. So Shirley had a great question. In many high performance and competitive environments, how does compassion find room? In majority of such cultures, compassion is perceived as a barrier or disruptive effect to trust, integrity, and credibility.
Yeah. So the simple answer to that is that it's because compassion, our experiences, it's misunderstood. So compassion is often considered sort of the nice, it's being nice and kind when you may not be tough. When we talk about compassion, we talk about fierce compassion as a part of compassion, which is a know and a clear accountability and boundaries. Because our work's so tied up into accountability, it's impossible to avoid. Without clarity and accountability, you get low performance and poor behavior. So a lot of the time, compassion is seen as we'll be compassionate instead of being accountable. We'll be nice instead of being tough. And what we help our clients see is that compassion, which is the basic kindness, which is, being attentive to people's suffering, but it's also tough conversations done from compassion. What's the difference? A tough conversation done with compassion is free of anger. A tough conversation done with anger is destructive, highly destructive. So we try and help people understand the paradox. Now, paradox is a fascinating subject because it's only at the higher levels of adult maturity that we can even understand paradox. But it's helping our clients understand the paradox. There's high accountability and high compassion. What does that look like? together, because most of our clients we find have got an unconscious idea that it's either or.
Awesome. And so one last question. What is the quickest way to get a large team to stop gossiping?
Gee, that's a big question. I mean, that's basically our 6 months program. We're actually right in the middle of it.
6 months is pretty quick, depending on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
time.
That's exactly what the quickest. It's a tip, and tips are always fraught, but I'll give it anyway. At the heart of gossiping is 3 things. Number 1 is a lack of integrity. So it's to help people see that that when you're gossiping, it's to remind them when you're gossiping, you are by definition out of integrity. So do not be expecting integrity from anyone else if you're gossiping, because you yourself are. And that's the first thing. The second thing is it's an absence of maturity. We gossip because we don't feel confident we can have an honest conversation with someone. And we can't have an honest conversation with someone who's defensive and in denial and in blame. They can't take ownership for their behaviors. So you'll find where there's gossiping, there's an absence of integrity, but there's also an absence of maturity in the team. The team are not equipped enough to handle honest conversations, right? And then the third thing is it's a lack of skill usually as well. So it's a lack of being able to have an honest conversation constructively. So there's 3 elements to it. What we found in our work is that most people are completely clueless to the realization that they're out of integrity. So, we had a leader recently who was conflict avoidant. And yet her walk the talk was integrity and generosity. And we're like, are you aware when you're not having an honest conversation with people, instead of being nice, you are out of integrity? And it was like, it took her I don't know, an hour to finally the penny to drop. My God, it is out of integrity. And here I was so proudly telling myself I'm in integrity. Well, not all the time. We find that's usually the most powerful realization, but then, you've still got to deal with the mature. People have got to grow up, basically, where you can sustain an honest conversation and own your stuff. Thank you, Sue.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for this 1 hour, 10 on the dot. So I think it's pretty perfect in terms of timing.
Thank you, everybody. Yay, I survived it. I'm sweating like crazy here.
It's okay. You can now go and sleep.
I'm going back to bed now.